After all my preliminary research, a lot of people are now asking me which of the flight schools are the best to go to. So let's talk about it. Hello my friends, I'm Adam. Welcome to Late Departure. And today I'm going to talk a little bit about the preliminary research that I've been doing on flight schools around Vancouver. And I've actually been researching them for over a month now. I've emailed them all, I've visited them all, and I'm going to do a brief overview today, which is something that I've been talking about with a lot of other prospective flyers in British Columbia, in Canada, and even some people around the world who have been asking me about which schools are good to go to. Now, again, I've only gone around, I've talked with the people, I've talked with the different flight schools, and I've found out as much information as I can. And I'm going to be going into further detail in another video, and I'll also talk a little bit more about which school I'm probably going to go to. I'll probably be deciding over the next couple weeks here, so it's quite exciting. So this is just a little bit of information that I have been talking about with other people, and I have it written down on my computer here, one of the most recent people who's asked me about flight schools in Vancouver. And let me just tell you what the general overview is. So the most recent person who asked me about this was someone on the BC General Aviation Association Facebook page, which is a great resource to find out more about flying in British Columbia. If you're not part of that, I suggest you join that group. And so just in the beginning here, I just mentioned about what I've done. So I've gone around to the major schools. I learned about them from online reviews on Google. I went to a website. There's a really good website called AV Canada, which I'll also link in the description here, which is really great to check out stuff. And I'm also in the Flying Canucks, which I'll also post a link to. This is a really great Discord group where you can talk with real pilots in Canada, including flight instructors, students, what have you. Really great resource. So this is kind of the culmination of what I talked about there. So my initial findings, just from looking at all the schools, were the best ones in terms of the reviews that I read online were Glacier Air in Squamish. That was one that got really good reviews. They apparently take really good care of their students. And from my own talks with them over the phone and going out there, they're really kind, they're really nice. They do have a waiting list, and right now they're prioritizing only students from that Squamish area. So I live in Vancouver, which is a little bit south of Squamish, and I actually got taken off their waiting list. They sent out an email a little while ago saying that people who are not in Squamish cannot be in the immediate waiting list. But I did ask to be put on the list that comes after that for people who are not living in Squamish. So that's something to keep in mind here. Another one is ProIFR. It's gotten fairly good reviews online, probably the best of the flight schools out of Boundary Bay, even out of pretty much all of the Lower Mainland here. And I've also talked with them. I'll be going into depth in another video where I went in person. I have some videos of their whole situation, how they're set up during COVID, and just in general what the school sort of feels like. And also, I went to a few others, like in Pitt Meadows, I visited Monterre, but one of the other ones that was worth mentioning was Island Coastal Aviation, which I'll talk a little bit about in more detail in just a moment. But needless to say, it actually is the only school in Vancouver that has no waiting list right now. And if that's something, if you want to get started right away, you don't really have much of a choice. But at the same time, they have instructors available, they have planes available. It's looking pretty good for them. So a lot of the other schools, though, they had a lot of complaints. So there are a whole bunch of schools, like for example, Pacific Flying Club, one of the oldest flying clubs in Canada and probably one of the most popular places for people to do their pilot license. The only problem with them is they are connected with BCIT, and a lot of what they do there is fast tracking the BCIT students. So if you're not a student at BCIT and you want to do your flight training, you can, but you're going to be pushed to the side. If it's a good day, you might not get up because all the BCIT students get preference in all of the spots. So just to get a little bit more into Island Coastal Aviation, so it is a good one. I visited them in person. Again, I'll talk about them in another video where I'll actually show you what it's like there. But the reason why they don't have a big waiting list is they changed owner apparently last year. Online, there were some complaints that the previous owner was pretty sketchy. He had sold the business, screwed over a bunch of students, some really unfortunate stuff. But from what I've heard from current students there and from the current staff, things are a lot better than they were. Even they've partnered up with Pacific Rim Aviation, which is another one at Pitt Meadows. Pacific Rim also has gotten some pretty good reviews. They are also very busy. They do have a waiting list, but they're another one. If you want to go to a more remote airport, they're definitely something you can consider. But Pacific Rim and Island Coastal they're kind of partnering up a little bit. So you might in the future be able to access both schools as aircraft. They're connecting together for ground schools and things like that. So that is kind of good. But if you want to get in right away, really Island Coastal Aviation is the good idea to go to. One of the other things about Island Coastal, while it is a good school and everything like that, I'm not sure if it was deliberate, but just my talk with the chief flight instructor, it kind of felt like they just really want to get the money. They want to make money. And I totally understand. It's a business and everything like that. But at the same time, as a customer, I'm hoping that someone who's going to invest $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 into something, that people really have my interests at heart and that they're in it not just for the money, but they have some passion for it. And I'm sure, no doubt, that they have passion there as well. But just a few things that the CFI said kind of gave me that impression. So it's just something I'm a little bit wary about. So for now, just for my first impressions, right now at the top, ProIFR, they have some of the most planes there. They're a bit more expensive than the other schools, but they do have a lot of passionate people there, and I've heard good things about them, and they've gotten really good reviews. So that's probably one of the top ones. If you're into going to a really busy airport, so Boundary Bay is the busiest airport in Canada, but it is something that you might want to consider if you really want a place that you're guaranteed that you're going to get a good experience, you're going to get your money's worth, a good place. If you want to start right away, Island Coastal, it's something to consider. No waiting list is a really big thing. And like a lot of pilots on YouTube say, if you want to learn how to fly, you got to get up in the air. That's the number one thing. And I've also, in terms of other areas, there's also the Langley Flying School and SkyQuest out in Langley. However, just from the reviews online, it seems like they don't have enough planes or instructors. And so a lot of students seem to be struggling to get in hours. And, the schools themselves seem like they're pretty good. They've gotten fairly, I'd say, reasonable reviews. They've kind of got half reviews if you check out all the forums online. However, it's, for me, really the fact is whether I can get up or not. So if it's not a huge deal for you, like if you're just going up casually or you don't care about getting your license soon, like you're willing to do it over the next few years, then perhaps, SkyQuest or the Langley Flying School are for you. And again, that's also good if you're in the area, if you're close to there. For me personally, I live in Vancouver, so it's half an hour for me to drive to ZBB, to Boundary Bay, and it's about an hour, a little more or less, depending on traffic, to get out to Langley or Pitt Meadows. So that's something to consider. But if you really want to fly, really the priority should be, can you get the planes, can you get the instructors, and can you get up? Now, there's one last school that I haven't talked about yet that one of the people asked me by a direct message on Facebook the other day, which is Sealand Air. Now, they fly Diamond aircraft, which is a low-wing aircraft that has a stick instead of a yoke. And that was one thing that people were asking me as well. And for me personally, I started training with the yoke. I don't really mind training with a stick, but the thing is, the Diamonds right now, because they are newer aircraft, they do have a little bit higher of a price tag, so typically $20, $30, $40 more than you would be paying if you were flying in like a Cessna 172 or a Cessna 152 or a Piper. And for some people, they really want to fly with a stick. And in the future, if you're planning on flying Airbuses, like if you really have a choice, you will be flying with a stick, a side stick anyways. So it's not a bad thing, but it's just something to consider that, you get newer aircraft, it'll cost a little bit more and you're flying stick versus maybe older aircraft, you're flying with a yoke. It's really up to your personal preference. I don't think it's really going to impact you much either way. But a lot of the professional pilots that I talk with in the Discord channel and also in the BC Aviation Facebook page, they say try as many planes as you can. So maybe down the road, I'll also try a Diamond, but this is just down to personal preference and whether you can afford to spend the extra $20, $30 an hour to rent a newer aircraft. After all, half an hour extra in the car is maybe a couple bucks extra in gas, whereas, being able to get up or not being able to get up, or being able to get up maybe in Boundary Bay, but taking 20 minutes to get to the practice area, that's a matter of, could be $50, $60, $70 just to go in that area, depending on whether you're flying dual or solo. So, if you're trying to save money, it's not quite as straightforward as it seems. So one of the other things that people have been asking me is about the colleges, and I did consider some of the aviation colleges as well, like the Okanagan College. There are some colleges out in the prairies. There are a whole bunch in Ontario, and a lot of these colleges, they also advertise that they have a direct entry into JAS and Air Canada's direct pathway program. And from what I've heard from people who are actually there, the chance of getting in them isn't that high. However, you have to go to those colleges to be eligible for it. So if you're just going to an independent school like I am, I wouldn't be eligible to go to the JAS Pathways program. However, if I get up hours a lot faster than someone who's at the colleges, because keep in mind the colleges, you finish in, could be 2 years or even more to finish something as simple as just the private pilot and the commercial, whereas you might be able to actually get that done in 1 year or less if you really drive really hard and go somewhere that has, again, the planes and the instructors available. That's just something to keep in mind. So you might be putting yourself at a disadvantage if you don't go to the college, but if you do go to the college, keep in mind you'll have to relocate to the Okanagan or to wherever the college is, be paying rent for that area, be finding an apartment out there. For me personally, because I live out here, it's a little bit more convenient, or a lot more convenient, to not have to go out and find a new apartment and go move somewhere. But if you're young and you're willing to do that, and also you're willing to pay the extra money, so that's another thing. The colleges could be anywhere from $25,000 and more expensive than some of the independent flight schools. So like the Okanagan College and some of the programs there, it's about $97,000 at some of them advertise for around $80,000, whereas you could get most of those kinds of things at an independent flight school for maybe $50,000, $60,000 if you're smart. Another thing to consider is those colleges give you a diploma, which these days, as far as I've heard, at some airlines, it's mandatory to have some kind of degree. But a lot of people online also recommend that if you're going to get a degree, get something in programming or in business or something that you can really fall back on and make some real money in. Because the aviation diploma, like for example, if your medical doesn't go through or you start flying and then something happens and you can't fly anymore, then you're stuck with this aviation diploma that's not really going to get you anywhere in life. So that's just something to consider if you're trying to think about the long run in your life. So I realize this video has been a little bit rambly, but there are a lot of different schools, a lot of things to consider. And like I said, I've been going to all these schools and researching all this for quite a while here. I am leaning in a certain direction now. And like I said, I'm going to mention which school I'm going to be going to, or I'm leaning towards in another video, and I'll give my reasons why. But in the meantime, I hope this kind of answers your questions. And for those of you who can't in person go to the schools for some reason, whether you're too far away or you're in a different country, or maybe you're nervous of COVID, and believe me, I was really nervous too, and it's something that I had a serious consideration of. And actually, speaking of which, again, sorry, rambling here, but ProIFR was one of the only schools that actually had a really, really good COVID check where you actually had to sign in. You had to, everyone was wearing gloves or wearing masks, and they were doing a really good job. That wasn't something that I saw at a lot of other schools, even though some of the schools had things like hand sanitizer and stuff. ProIFR was really impressive with that. But in any case, if that's one of the reasons, that's another thing you might want to consider for the school. In any case, I'll stop rambling here, and if you have any questions, please let me know in the comments, and I'll try to address them in a future video. And I look forward to telling everyone about, again, the aviation medical, how my training is looking, where I'm leaning towards, and whatnot in the future. And soon enough, we'll find out whether or not I can go on this late departure and start this training at my age, and we'll see how this journey begins. So once again, I'm Adam, this is Late Departure, and fly safe.